after snowstorm's over, we need to get back in and clean those stalls out of snow, both sides of the road, because if we don't and the cars are parked there, they'll freeze. Right. And then the person parking there the next day is gonna be getting out on ice. It also makes it more difficult for us after the storm to have the snow consolidated in the areas between the sidewalk and the road, so we can come back in and clean up those areas.
So essentially it's not practical and efficient to do that.
I don't think so.
Very fair. All right.
My sense also is that there's enough parking spots, even in the public ones, to accommodate the people, the number of cars who were parking overnight, or at least confused about what the rules were, judging by the number of tickets and cars that were out there, from what we've learned in the past couple weeks. So when we looked at that, we had the same question: are there enough spots? But I think, judging by the maximum amount of cars that were out there, I think we had 11 to 15. I'm looking at Chief Walsh, but 11 to 15 is a maximum who were needing to be notified or in some cases towed. So that can easily fit into any of the lots.
I think that, if it was a busier and there were more occupied residences in the downtown, that would be a bigger concern, but the reality is that it's fairly limited. And I'm happy to hear from people who live downtown as to their thoughts on this. That's who it was, I don't remember the gentleman's name well, you weren't the one who brought this to us originally, right?
Can I, Sean?
No, I think I was.
Like,
I don't know.
2 years ago?
I was in last week.
No, I'm talking about 2 years ago.
No.
Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
I think three things. One, the date we're talking about was November 15th. And are we concerned, a few years ago we had a Halloween snowstorm, or we'll just deal if that happens?
We'll just deal with that.
The second is, I just want to say out loud what I think Sean started to say and didn't want to say out loud, which is we don't plan to tow cars if we don't need to, if it's not snowing, if it's not something we're going to go around enforcing all winter, which doesn't mean you can be complacent, because we've all done that.
Well, that wasn't. I mean, that I understand, but what happens if are we ticketing cars?
I guess I would say it.
Violators will be ticketed. Vehicles that block DPW snow plows will be towed at the owner's expense.
So, do we want to ticket cars if they aren't a problem?
Well, the problem is it's very difficult to write a policy that says you don't ticket unless it's snowing.
No, I guess I wouldn't write that. I just wouldn't do it.
Well, but that's not good governance.
Yeah, that's we need to be. I think we need to be stricter with this.
That's why you more experienced members have the smarts not to say it out loud.
Barely, but I mean, I think that the thought I had is maybe the ticket is less if you're parked overnight. So it's enough so that you don't want to do it, but it's not so much that you really.
I think it's important to have what has worked in the past, the consistent ticket, and realize too that what we've experienced is that this is the Berkshires. If you want different weather, you just wait 10 minutes, right? Isn't that the saying? So we've seen conditions change, particularly with icy conditions. Kind of in those early hours of the morning, and this has to be really. There's parking concerns for people who live downtown. But as town manager, I also hear a lot of people who have situations where maybe they've slipped and fell around town, and we certainly don't want to have that situation and people getting out of their cars, going to places in the morning to shop, and get out of their cars and slip and fall. So it's an important concern. So I want to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure we're not in a situation where, hey, there's a bunch of cars again who got used to feeling that the parking wasn't enforced.
Right.
We've done a lot of work to enforce things more in the past year in general for parking, which is the way you manage parking. People want to have more spots open. Well, you get the cars moving around, and that's how it works in general. So.
Well, but then you also, there's a downside to that potentially, which is that people feel like they can't. It's not, it's a little bit too uptight, and maybe I'm just going to go somewhere where I can leave my car for a longer period of time and do some more shopping. So you know, that goes both ways. And I don't quite understand the potential downside to having lower parking, like if you're,
What is it now?
The
it's
what?
$20,
It's $20 now?
yeah.
What's lower?
And you
than
wanna
going?
lower it?
I don't, is it $20, Chief, do you?
It is.
Yeah. So if you stay over your 2 hour, 4 hour, whatever it is, unless it's a handicap, then it's, I think, $100.
No, but we're talking about overnight, let's not.
No,
mix. Yeah, let's not,
Well, the $20 is across the board except for handicap parking.
right, but what we're discussing now is the
I
fine for
understand, so
overnight.
that's why I'm saying the possibility of lower. I lived on Railroad Street. I was in my mid-20s when I lived on Railroad Street, and I definitely left my car on Railroad Street overnight in the winter, and I definitely got a ticket, and I think it was $20 back then.
So
But-
it hasn't gone up.
Hasn't gone up in a long time.
Maybe we should raise them then.
Well, if we wanna see it as a revenue source, then we could raise it, sure, but I don't, it should be a tool, and not necessarily, it's not a tax, it's a tool.
It's a
so-
fine.
Yeah, and if the priority is to be punishing people, penalizing people for parking longer than the allotted amount of time, then certainly raising it is an option. I would say enough to, $20, you'll remember not to do it again, hopefully. So,
I think if you lower it to $10 or $15, people are gonna be like, yeah, $10 or $15.
well, I'm not gonna pay $10 or $15 for the convenience of not parking 100 yards away. Anyway. So,
I have,
yeah, if you don't mind, that's what I'm supposed to do. I let Michael get away
Okay. Does
with
Chief
it.
Walsh wanna?
If he wants to, he can.
you want to speak before me?
Go right ahead, absolutely not.
Holly Hamer, Seacon Crossroad. I have worked on Railroad Street for decades, and the only problem I have with this discussion is that the lots that are overnight are, I think the privilege is abused by a lot of people who, for instance, there's a company that houses 3 or 4 trucks there, and they're there constantly, and they're there on Sundays. They're not ticketed, and there are people who take the bus to New York who leave their car on the lots for the weekend that are not from Great Barrington. There are a number of people who leave their car the entire winter season on the top of Railroad Street. You can see because it's constantly plowed in and you know who it is. And I just wonder if this would make, I'm not saying that the town has an obligation to provide parking or whether it does or not, but if it is providing some free overnight parking, it should be egalitarian, I think, and should be specifically for local residents. And that could probably be accomplished by issuing a free permit to proof of address to anybody who went to town hall and did that. I think you'd see a lot of those spaces cleared up, and if anybody needs to be paying, for parking from a private lot, it should be businesses and professionals and people who go to New York for the weekend, I think.
Or anywhere else for that.
Or anywhere else, exactly. And I think that would be very helpful, not just for the snow emergencies, but in general. Those lots you see, if you work downtown, you see the same cars in the same places all the time. And I think that is just a suggestion.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think that the idea of having, and this is what I want to nail down a little bit better, like where are the places, what kind of we have a parking map. I don't know that the top of Railroad Street is unlimited parking. Maybe it is, but
It is overnight, it's 4 hours during the day, I think.
But there's, no,
unlimited.
it's unlimited. You can park there for a
On
week,
top of Railroad.
weeks, months.
Months.
And people do.
Cars
And
do.
people do, and I think that's a really good point, because you can also, there are people who do pay for parking in the downtown, and it's not that expensive, but that's a good question, and I think that the idea that if you can prove that you live on one of in this specific area, then you can have a parking pass that allows you to park in these lots, not necessarily indefinitely. I don't know, but that's what I think. Those are the things that I think we should nail that down a little bit tighter, so that there is less question about where to park. If you, well, Chief Walsh, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things.
Just want to get over there.
Yeah, you just gotta come to the podium. So
Just a couple of things, for informational purposes.
Sure.
I guess just to start off, what you were just talking about with Holly, it's probably a good point if you could limit that somehow. I know prior to the 4-hour limit up here, I know there was one particular business in town that all weekend long, they parked their hopefully trucks up there all weekend long. There's nothing we could do about it. At least now you have the 4 hours, but again, that's during the daytime. So it can and has been to a small degree abused by some people over the years, staying up there all weekend. Anyways, during the snowstorm, they probably should get out there at some point, get the car out of there. Okay. A couple quick things, just some things you mentioned, just to give you information wise. I know Ed asked about the October 4th snowstorm, and years and years ago, the ban actually was 2 weeks earlier and 2 weeks later. And I actually put it on the Maytown warrant years ago to shorten it on both ends by 2 weeks, only because it did go from 2 weeks shorter than it is right now, and that's just way too long. Occasionally you may get the funky October storm, and then we just have to punt and do what we can. But it actually was too long years ago, and people would really get upset when they're getting tickets, and it's it's like spring out there. So I think the dates Jennifer poses are good. And second point is that I think Steve has some discussion about maybe incorporating and where we come up with and writing official warning notices that we put out. I think you said that.
Yes.
And that's certainly a good idea. We have done that for as long as I've been here. We have always, we have a warning notice. I've always instructed the midnight shift for as long as I've been here. We put out those warning notices 2 weeks prior to the start date. We'd slap them on windshields, and we were always good about doing that. We didn't just go out there cold one night and start enforcing it. And the other thing along the lines of warnings is that, I think you mentioned it, is that this past winter in particular, the midnight shift guys have been very, very good about trying to get hold of an owner and get the cars out of there. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that. There's a couple of ways we have of doing it, but it's not, it's not ironclad. They have been able to get, probably about half the number of cars that we had told out of there by knocking on doors, the good old-fashioned way. But it's not a catch-all process. You get lucky, and other people, we don't know who they are, and they get a ticket. But we have tried that in the spirit of cooperation. We were able to track down an owner, knock on their door at 3 in the morning, and tell them, hey, you might want to move it. So we have tried that.
Move it or lose it.
Yeah, and the last thing, I just throw this out there, when you had the discussion about private property and putting things in your new policy or bylaw, and maybe I misunderstood some of it, but.
Well, that was brought up, but I don't think we can put that in a town
Well,
policy.
that's where I was going with it. I wasn't quite sure where you left that. We probably can't put private stuff in the bylaw, and.
Not unless we're willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure where you were going with that, so I brought it up. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chief.
Maybe when we put the warnings out, we could have a map of where you can park on the back of the warning
Sure.
or something like that, so that becomes clear.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
What's your name, sir?
Remind us
Oh,
again.
Benjamin Abelow. Yeah. Just kind of a clarification to start with. This one, I kind of lost a minute. This question of the ticketing versus the towing. The ticketing you were talking about just for daytime parking on snow.
No, the point is, it's an all-out winter parking ban from, basically it would be November 15th to April 15th, right? With a 2-week grace period and starting, well, not grace, but warning period starting on November 1st.
On-street ban.
On-street ban. Well, not just, it's with specified places where you can park, so it's. It's actually town-wide, so I have a house on Hart Street in Housatonic, and they would put the same warning on my car if it was parked on the street, so I had to fit 4 cars into a driveway.
And you're not just talking overnight, you're talking.
I'm talking
2 hours
only
a day.
overnight.
Only overnight.
Yeah, we're only dealing with
Okay.
overnight right now.
Only overnight, okay.
Yeah, so if there's no winter storm, you would get a $20 ticket if you're parking on
Overnight.
street and not in the correct place overnight.
Mhm.
If there is a winter storm, you're gonna get towed. So but not necessarily if there's a winter storm. If you're parked there and it's snowing and they're plowing and it's overnight after, 8 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. If you're there on the street after 1 o'clock and it's snowing and they're plowing, you're gonna get towed.
After 1 o'clock a.m.?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
If you're parked there after 1 o'clock a.m. and they're clearing the snow, you're probably gonna get towed. So it might not be snowing, but
So 1 o'clock is pretty much is going to be the consistent cutoff?
Yeah, and that's how it used to be. It sounds like you weren't here in town 2 years ago, but 2 years ago is when about 2 years ago, maybe it was a year, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, no, I was in town 2 years ago.
Okay, well, there was an all-out
Yeah,
winter parking.
although I was away a lot, yeah.
So luckily you didn't leave your car on one of the streets, but the point is, we're basically going back, but creating some more clarity so that people who do live downtown have an understanding of where.
Thanks. Let me ask another clarifying question. The lots, let's say, just to take an example, the one up above the triplex.
Right, that would be available for you to park overnight.
Right, now, what are the limits during the daytime there? Does one have to
4
move the car?
hours.
There's a parking map on our website and it has all of the parking
Well,
hours.
wait a minute, I just want to say, I mean, I've had,
Okay.
I tried to work with this system very carefully the last couple of years and it did not go smoothly.
Okay,
So whatever's up or not up.
so,
you know.
so that's what the rules are, so I just wanna make sure that
Right.
you're not.
Well, I just want to be
giving the
clear, I
wrong
mean, also, is
information
it
on-
really necessary that, every day I get up there and move the car?
No, sorry, so I was wrong. That lot is unlimited. You can park in that lot you could leave your car there for years, as long as it's
As of right
registered.
now. We
As
could
of
change
right
that in
now.
10
Right.
minutes.
We're talking about changing it because what happens is, people who don't live downtown,
No, I understand that,
okay,
yeah. So right now, you're saying you don't need to move the car every 4 hours out of the lot?
not in that lot.
Not in that lot, okay, now,
But that was unclear before, and that's what we wanna make sure is crystal clear.
okay, all these things have been down. Now, just to be really, to set a framework here for a second, it's already February now. This process, how many days have there been? I'm just trying to get a sense here, what we're really talking about here. We're talking about changing everything around. How many days so far have there been when cars actually had to be towed? Are we 2, 3 days total?
no.
That doesn't mean
Yeah.
More?
Yeah, maybe 6.
Maybe 6 days?
6 days. But the point is, so the thing to keep in mind is that the way that we have it now is pretty much an anomaly in Massachusetts, let alone, in
Look,
Berkshire
I have no
County,
problem with
certainly.
any way it can be worked out comfortably, as long as it really works. I was not so thrilled with, I think Jennifer's comments, were a little bit overly sanguine about the idea of private lots being available. I did quite a bit of digging in the last 2 years to look for private lots. People are looking for hundreds of dollars to
A month?
Yeah, hundreds. It was I can't remember the exact figure. Could be 150, but they're not easy to find to start with. People send you to go talk to somebody else. You go there, they go say talk to the real estate agency. No, talk to the hardware store that's now the HVAC place.
Well, that's not.
It was not cheap, and I couldn't even find anything.
I can tell you there's a private lot, and I won't because it's not my place to say so, but it charges absolutely nothing because they cannot charge anything because they're a not-for-profit place.
Well,
And you could probably figure out from what I'm trying to tell you where that is.
well, I can't. But
Maybe after the meeting.
Maybe after the meeting comes in.
Yeah.
If you need to go to TD Bank, maybe that would be helpful.
They're a for-profit.
yeah, I'm afraid I'm not.
I know, they're a tenant though.
Enough in the system to understand these codes.
Okay.
But as far as the adequacy of parking up in those lots, my recollection was that in the past, and this may bear on the questions we're talking about, whether there's extra trucks, whether there's people who are not even in town, who are leaving their car up there for a month and going off to, Hawaii or something. I don't believe that there were consistently enough spaces up at these places. My recollection was I really had to drive around and try to find places, and it was a big headache.
Right, so I think that goes to Holly's point, which I think is a good one, that we would try to figure out a way so that those lots, there's some way, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but the point is to try and accommodate people like yourself who live downtown and are not, and well, you could potentially leave your car, but you would have a permit that says this person lives downtown, and you would renew it annually, or whatever, and that would allow you. What it wouldn't necessarily guarantee you a spot, because I don't think we're going to get into that. But what it would do is make it easier for us to get the people out of that lot who are leaving their car for months and months, but don't live downtown.
Right. Well,
And this is overnight stuff we're talking about, because if you work in town, sure, you can park there all day long.
Right. Right.
So.
I guess a question also I would have to be the towing fees. I mean, hopefully the system will be worked out enough that I'm no longer concerned about what towing fees are.
Right.
But you know, one of my concerns last time was just that it was crazy to pay $150 to have a car towed a half mile.
So that is I mean, the town doesn't have a contract with the towing company. We call whichever ones, I think there's a rotating, we go between the first two, and then there's a third one that we call if those two are busy. And the rate, as I understand it, the maximum is set by the state, but they could charge less, but of
Is
course
there
they're
some
not
way,
going to.
what would happen if you did like just a closed envelope bidding among those three places and just say, you can have the whole thing,
What if
it's a
they're not,
substantial
what if they're not
job.
available, and then we have to go to the next one and it's, the rate changes, or, I don't know. I mean, I think that your first point is the more important one, which is that if we can figure this out, we won't need to utilize the towing nearly as much.
Right, I mean, I don't want to be towed regardless. That's
No,
what
I
they
don't
get.
think anybody does.
So, yeah, so if a system can be worked out where you really don't have to worry about that, that'd be great.
That is the goal here. I think everybody's on the same page about that.
Right. I just want to say, with all due respect to the police department, I know you guys are, it's extra effort, it's not like you're bothering anybody, but I personally, you know, if I have an emergency or something, I'm thrilled to know the police are available. I don't like the idea of police just showing up my door and knocking on a regular basis. You know, I don't feel like that should be part of the system.
Again, you're talking about something that we're all trying to avoid, desperately trying to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a hey for you guys too.
I appreciate that they did it because it's
no, so do I, but I'm just saying
it's way above and beyond the level of service that the police department should.
Right.
I mean, their level of service that they're providing, which is excellent, but that's sort of outside the realm of their responsibility.
Right.
And I think really it was mostly just trying to do a favor to people who were about to get their car towed.
Right.
So.
Right.
But we're all on the same page in terms of wanting to avoid that.
Okay. So, you know, I guess one of the issues would be when these things are all set down in paper, is there going to be any review process that, you know,
Certainly
people can
we'll
look
have
at and make sure it's really
I think we
all
have
the bases are covered?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a good framework now, and I think between Jennifer and Chief Walsh and Sean VanDeusen, sort of the three players, and the select board, and we can hopefully sort of mix it, you know, sort of look at it with our current parking maps and make sure that we get a solid, sort of, you know, indestructible parking regulation that meets everybody's needs to the best of our ability. Obviously, you're not going to be able to park outside your front door anymore.
No, I don't park there anyway.
Well, that was the idea, is that people would be able to park closer to their apartment when it wasn't snowing, but it hasn't. I think we can all safely say that it hasn't worked the way that we hoped it would.
Right. In terms of daytime parking, are the times will Church Street be under the same rules as the main street?
Daytime parking is a totally different animal.
A totally different
Doesn't
animal.
matter if it's snowing or not. You can still park during the day.
Right.
It's only talking about from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock.
Right.
So the daytime parking is the same 365 days a year.
And the parking map is on the website, so that's the most easiest thing to look up the rules.
But are you saying that what's on the website now is going to be what's the new system?
Well, that's the parking map that explains what the daytime regulations are. But I think there's still some more signage that's needed, regardless of what map sets.
I mean, right now, for instance, the upper lots above the triplex, it says that there's a 4-hour limit.
It's
And
on the street, it's a 4-hour limit, but it's not clear. I agree.
All I can say is that anytime I go up there, I see those signs, I say, I don't know what's going
I
on.
understand, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
That needs to be clarified and need better signage.
Yeah. And then the locations of all the lots are, you're saying, at the town website now?
I just sent it to you.
You just sent
I
it?
just emailed it.
Okay.
At that level of service.
All right. Yeah, that was great. And if I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Me.
No,
Dan.
Dan. If you want to figure out a code that I can understand,
I'm more than happy to tell you
Send it by email.
yeah. So listen, the other question, the personal question I had last time had to do with getting reimbursement.
Yeah, you know how I feel about it.
Yeah. So what's the word on that?
Can we stick to this topic? Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I apologize. We need to wrap this up and then we can deal with that
Okay.
afterwards. Thank you, Steve, for keeping me going in the same direction. Okay, is there anything else? I think it's clear. I think we need to have, I mean, it's a little bit difficult for us to shift gears right now, but we could do that and then clarify so that, I think maybe what we should do is say, okay, Chief Walsh, will you please start warning people who are parking on the same streets that it was when we had the winter parking ban, and then let's rewrite the bylaw. I mean, I think it's all there, I think, but
Can I try to make a motion and see if it's gonna be long and convoluted, because this discussion has been, but I'll try. I'll make a motion that from November 15th through March 30th, overnight on-street parking is prohibited between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. Violators will be ticketed. Vehicles that block DPW snowplows will be towed at the owner's expense. That's the easy part. In addition, from November 1st to November 14th, beginning of season warnings are issued. That signs are put up at the top of Railroad Street, top of Castle Street, Town Hall parking lot, and Mason Library parking lot, saying that overnight parking is allowed on those year-round. In addition, I make a motion that we restrict currently unrestricted parking lots to 24 hours, because I think that's, well, I'll go into it. And finally, that we direct the town manager to begin the investigation of the feasibility of parking stickers for residents of downtown Great Barrington.
Okay. Second. Is there any, I think that captured most, if not all of it. I think it's important that we put that into, we made the motion with the second, but we needed also to be the parking regulations. So should we have that come back to us in a draft form?
I think once we approve it, then it comes back to us and we approve the draft.
Okay.
So this doesn't take effect immediately, right? It
Well, I
doesn't
think
affect
we
us
can
till
also
September
deal with that. I
1st.
mean, I think we should do something immediately because I don't think it's fair for people. There's just too much ambiguity.
I think that it takes effect immediately, and I think it's clear.
I think it's pretty clear,
Yeah.
and it's consistent with similar policies in the past that have been pretty
But
effective.
not everybody has experienced those policies.
Yeah, but I think that those work, so I think that number one is they work, and we should be able to, this is not ambiguous like the other ones.
Okay, second.
At the risk of saying it again, can we consider being gentle about ticketing, at least in the beginning, if it isn't snowing?
I
Just
think it's
because,
difficult to write that into the motion.
I understand
Yes.
that, I guess I'm just saying that out loud.
And I think we should be clear that the motion, if approved tonight, this will start immediately with appropriate warnings.
Right.
Chief,
we have 2
you're
weeks
on
of
board with
warnings?
that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have 2 weeks of warnings before we
I
start?
would-
Not if we have a bad snowstorm in 3 days. I think if the chief in the next few days can put out some warnings,
Leave it up to the
and
chief.
then,
And perhaps the warnings could have a map of, or give the locations of where you can park
Yeah.
overnight?
But the problem is, I just am concerned about the efficacy of the maps. And I understand that we spent a lot of time creating the maps. I haven't looked at one recently, so I don't have it, but I do know that there is some there is, and I don't know if it's been fixed at the top of Railroad Street, but there was definitely some confusion as to where was 4 hours, where was 2 hours, and where is unlimited.
We're on that. I don't know if
Has
it's been done completely yet, but
Okay.
we're aware of the
Just a
issue.
list of where you can
Yeah.
park.
Yeah.
You can list it
Yeah.
right enough.
Actually, just one quick question. Are there ever circumstances in the lots where the lots themselves get plowed and you have to
Only
get out
as
of
it,
there?
only as it's available, but we wouldn't tow anybody's car out of those lots.
Unless it had Connecticut plates?
I'm sorry?
Unless it had Connecticut plates?
Doesn't matter where the license plates are.
The only reason we would if they were there for more than 24 hours.
Well, is that,
If
that's
this
a,
is
that's a,
approved.
but that's a, okay. I have a problem with that level of change because you have people who've been there and maybe they're not even anywhere in town.
Well, I don't think we start, I think everyone is sensible enough that we don't do that until there's signage up in those lots and that there's adequate warning given. I think, yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna
I
go
guess I'm
tonight
Okay.
and tow cars out of
I
there.
guess I'm just shying away from the, leaving it up to interpretation,
But I think that everyone understands that when there are major changes like this, that they have to be implemented slowly.
okay. I'm coming back to you if I get any,
Chief is not gonna tell anyone tonight because we voted this way.
How about a motion that it doesn't snow anymore for the rest of the winter?
no, then it's only just gonna rain.
There are certain businesses in town that might
Isn't
not
it
do
over
that.
yet?
Okay, we have a motion, a second, good discussion, anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Eileen?
Are you going to change the parking regulations
Yes.
in the town bylaws?
Yes.
Yeah.
We essentially just did, but we're
Yeah.
gonna
Like,
officially.
go through the town meeting?
I'm not sure about that part of it, but if it requires town meeting or not.
I don't think it did to make this change.
I'm not positive.
We need to figure that out, because if it,
Okay.
I think it's
if
a
it
regulation.
did
If it's
require
not-
town meeting, then there was never a change.
I think it's a regulation, not a
Right.
bylaw.
Well, let's not just think
I will
about it,
double
let's
check
know
it.
for sure.
Mhm.
Okay,